My family kept our future in a Costco pickle jar on top of the fridge, beside a rooster magnet that always looked disappointed in our budget. Masking tape label. Emergency. In our Millbrook, Ohio house, emergency meant the water heater, the transmission, or the dog eating another sock. It did not, according to my parents, mean college. Dad had a slogan. College isn't for people like us, Nate, he'd say, tapping the jar like it was a beating heart. He did maintenance at the plastics plant. Mom worked breakfast at Dot's Diner, where the coffee could dissolve a spoon and the gossip could dissolve marriages. We weren't miserable, just budgeted. The thermostat had 2 settings. Put on a hoodie. And, you're being dramatic. I was the library kid. Sophomore year, Ms. Patel, the guidance counselor with a cardigan for every mood, slid me a pamphlet. Your SAT could pull scholarships, she said. We can get fee waivers. Let's try. I brought the pamphlet home like contraband. At dinner I started. There are waivers for the SATN. No. Dad didn't look up from the meatloaf. Mom added, we don't do debt. Tyler's neighbor's kid got a degree and works at the car wash. In our family that story was scripture. I let it go. Out loud anyway. Inside, something lodged behind my ribs. People like us. Sounds humble, but it's offense. I could feel it every time I stocked grocery shelves after school or changed fryer oil on weekends. I wasn't afraid of work. I was afraid work would be the whole story. Senior spring, the jar grew heavy. Quarters, crumpled 20s, bills banded with a napkin like polite ransom. Saving up, Dad said. For emergencies. We skipped restaurants. Mom rinsed Ziplocs like heirlooms. Even the thermostat gave up. Then Uncle Mitch announced after church. Tyler got a full ride. The living room exploded. Aunt Kay cried into a tissue that had clearly served other battles. For football? I asked, too bright. Tyler was fast in the way you get when you outrun responsibility. Drumline, Aunt Kay said, glowing. Our boy's a scholar. Good for him, I thought, mostly. Dad clapped his hands. Family meeting! He reached for the fridge and came back with the jar. The rooster magnet watched. We'll do right by Tyler, he said. He's representing us. A slid into place like a puzzle piece. The lid twisted, coins flashed, bills sighed. We said that money was... Mom started. For emergencies, Dad finished. He leaves in August. He needs a laptop, a housing deposit, gas money. It's a send-off. Send-off. The same jar that vetoed my test fees suddenly had oxygen for someone else's full ride. I looked at Tyler's loose smile, the look of a kid who thinks the world runs on a subscription in his name. I can get a discount on a laptop, I heard myself say, because apparently I'm sponsored by conflict avoidance. You're a good kid, Dad said, ruffling my hair like I was 12. It was meant as affection. It landed like static. We went to the big box store. Dad paid from the jar, proud. I checked the receipt and did subtraction from a life I hadn't priced out loud. At the library, because our printer jammed on Emotions, Tyler printed housing forms while I wandered to the college shelf. I ran my fingers along spines with places I'd only seen on sweatshirts. I let myself imagine leaving Millbrook. It hit like a gust when you open a door too fast. I didn't say it. I just slid a financial aid book under my jacket like a secret handshake with my future. By dinner, the jar was half empty. Dad called it investing in family. I called it a clue. I didn't fight. I did laundry. I patched the screen door. I said, good for him, until it tasted like paper. Then, between me and that offended rooster magnet, I made a quiet promise. If no one would sponsor my try, I'd sponsor it myself. I didn't know how yet. But I knew where to start, the night shift. I got my first syllabus from the stockroom. Lonnie, the graveyard manager, tossed me a reflective vest. Welcome to nights, Professor, he said, because I kept a notebook like knowledge might leak. Midnight to 6, faced the cereal aisle so every cartoon tiger looked hopeful, mop yogurt explosions, breathe resin drifting from the plastics plant. Between pallets I cracked a used SAT book. The margins were graffiti with other kids' panic. Remember SOHCHTOA. Omit the weird one. Acquire from the page edges, you got this. Ms. Patel signed me up with fee waivers. Use the school address, she said. In case your mailbox is curated. Curated is one word for mom, mail TSA. Catalogs made it. Anything with education, detoured to the trash can buy the back door. I bought a lockbox, slid it under my bed, and labeled it, spare parts. Dad joked I was the spare son. Fine, spares keep things moving when something fails. Days stacked like drywall. School. Shift. Shower. Homework nap. Shift. I studied at Dot's Diner during the hour between night cops and morning regulars. Mom slid me leftover pancakes on a plate shaped like Ohio. You'll make yourself sick, she said, but quartered them anyway. At home, Tyler practiced paradiddles on the kitchen table, and Kay timing with an app. Dad leaned back, proud. Hear that? That's scholarship. Then to me. Nothing wrong with honest work, Nate. Books don't change oil. True, I said. But they tell you why it gets dirty. He laughed like I'd overbuilt a joke. Saturdays, a handful of us met in Ms. Patel's office. A softball pitcher who loved proofs, a kid who'd grafted 2 broken Roombas into a robot, me smelling of fryer oil. The test is a maze, Ms. Patel said. Not a mirror. You don't get smaller because it's narrow. You get strategic. I told my parents I was doing double shifts, technically true, the shift in the cereal aisle, then the shift in my head. Test day arrived with February cold. The gym smelled like erasers and unspoken hopes. A proctor droned instructions that could have launched a rocket. I sharpened 3 pencils, then a 4th because the first 3 were cocky. Math tried to crawl out of my ear around question 3. I coaxed it back with the promise of diner pancakes. Reading made me argue with a 19th century senator about corn tariffs. I underlined verbs, wrote mean little haikus in the margins, and bubbled circles like I was dialing out of town. When the last bubble popped, I stared at the lights like I'd just come up for air. I didn't go home. I went to the library and filled out applications on sites where tax forms had a baby with dreams. My essay was called The Jar. I wrote about emergency money that could buy a laptop for one cousin but not a test for me, about the rooster magnet that stared at our future like it was overcooked. I didn't make myself tragic. I made myself useful. Weeks folded. Tyler's farewell party filled our living room with deviled eggs and opinions. Dad raised a solo cup. To our college man. Everyone looked at Tyler like he'd invented snare drums. I clapped and meant it, and also didn't. 2 true things can sit at the same table and not touch. Monday, Ms. Patel beckoned me in. A single envelope sat on her desk. Mail for you, she said. I opened it. Her voice was guilty, her eyes weren't. Mid-States crest. A tidy paragraph. Then the sentence that sounded like a jar lid finally loosening. We are delighted to offer. Need-based grant. Merit award. Work study and facilities. A number at the bottom that wasn't a miracle but knew the choreography. I laughed first. Then cried. Mess. Patel pushed over tissues. See? Strategy. How do I tell them? I asked. The people who love you best and sometimes least. You don't have to tell them, she said. You can't show them. I put the letter in the lockbox, on top of the spare parts. Ms. Patel slid a form across her desk. Permission to open mail addressed here. I signed before the pen caught breath. Also, call FAFSA. Verification likes documents. Mom kept documents in a cookie tin. I asked for my birth certificate and social security card. She dug past expired coupons and a Polaroid of me in a dinosaur suit. Why do you need these? Work stuff, I said, meaning the rest of my life. I uploaded what FAFSA wanted at the library scanner and went home with a folder labeled, in my handwriting, proof I exist. 2 weeks later another mid-state envelope landed at school. Ms. Patel didn't sit. Open it. Award adjusted. Deposit deferral approved. Work study with facilities confirmed. Reading it felt like twisting the jar lid the rest of the way. I could finally breathe without counting quarters. For the reveal I chose Tuesday meatloaf. Dad tapped the emergency jar out of habit. The rooster magnet glared like an HOA. I got in, I said, sliding the letter to the center. In where? Dad kept his fork. Mom wiped a dish towel clean. Mid-state. With grants. And a campus job. No loans unless I want them. I tried to sound like a mechanic quoting a repair you can actually afford. Dad read the first paragraph, skipped to numbers. This isn't nothing. Then the fence went back up. But college isn't for people like us. I'd been saving one sentence for months. The jar paid for Tyler's laptop and deposit. Could it cover my bus to orientation? Aunt Kay, returning a casserole dish, jumped in. Full ride covers tuition, she said. Not deposits, travel, or a decent laptop. We helped him with those. Dad nodded like we were revisiting settled law. Exactly. Emergencies. For him, I said gently. My emergency was a test fee. Silence rearranged the air. Mom set down the towel. How much is the bus? $48 if I book tonight. Dad rubbed his jaw. I told everyone we don't do debt. I tapped the line about grants and work study. Then you get to keep telling them that. I'll be mopping lecture halls at 5 a.m., same as the grocery store. He studied me a long time, like a person carrying his own plan. Finally, if you're going to do this, do it without making us feel small. I've spent 18 years practicing that, I said. Mom's eyes flicked to me, then to the jar. She took down the rooster magnet. Take 60, she said. Bring back change. And text when you get there. Dad didn't object. He tapped the table twice, a tiny gavel. Meeting adjourned. At dawn we drove to the bus station. The terminal smelled like coffee. My bag was a thrift store duffel with a zipper that sounded like honesty. Mom fussed with my scarf in August because fussing is a language. Dad put his hands in his pockets and took them out again. You sure about this? He asked. No, I said. That's why it's called learning. Midstate rose out of trees and brick. Facilities handed me a ring of keys and a schedule that started before sunrise. I shined an auditorium floor until it reflected the ceiling lights like constellations. First paycheck posted Friday. I took a picture for the lockbox. Orientation herded us into the student center. A table by the door held alumni magazines with glossy people walking. I grabbed one and flipped to the back page where ordinary faces sit in rows under captions that say they did something anyway. I stopped at the custodial staff photo, found a man with hands like Dad's, and felt my throat go tight. I wasn't leaving them behind. I was bringing our work with me. Text to Mom, made it. I'll call after my shift. She sent back 3 hearts and a rooster. My first midstate friendship was with a floor buffer named Agnes. Steer her wrong and she'd walk you into a wall. Joe, my supervisor, handed me earplugs. Lesson 1, Nate, shine the floor, don't let it shine you. We started at 4:45 a.m. Campus was all breath and sprinklers. I learned Kelvin from wattage and which fixtures hummed. Empty rooms have a holiness before people fill them with noise. I liked being the ghost that made things ready. Class at 9. I sat in Intro to Economics with my facilities polo tucked in because my body didn't know how to be a student yet. The girl next to me had a laptop that folded into 8 shapes. I had a library loaner with a sticker that said please bring me home. A kid in a vintage band tee asked if I was with maintenance. Facilities, I said. Cool, he replied. I wrote, stop apologizing for the job that pays for the seat you're in. Money was constant math. I rationed the meal plan, hunted free pizza, and learned the union tossed bagels at 2 p.m. I texted Mom a picture of my first paycheck, for the jar. She replied with a rooster and, keep it. Nights, I tutored stats for $10 an hour. Teaching steadied me. It's hard to feel like an imposter while explaining why the curve leans left. Week 3, Joe found me frowning at an auditorium thermostat. Seats empty, AC roaring like we were refrigerating ghosts. Hurts me in my utility soul, Joe said. What if we had occupancy sensors? I asked. HVAC naps when the room does. Write it up. So I did, from kilowatt hours to payback period, in a Google Doc that borrowed a tie. I emailed sustainability and forgot about it. 2 days later, a woman named Lila arrived with iced coffee and velocity. You're Nate? The sensor kid? We have a student green fund. She talked pilot buildings and budget lines. Joe looked at me like I'd smuggled contraband hope into facilities. Classes sharpened and then bit back. Calc midterm, a polite mugging. I got a 72 and called home from a stairwell that smelled like bleach and late decisions. 72 is passing, Mom said. You've cooked soup with less. Dad took the phone. Work the problem. You've worked tougher. He didn't tell me to come home. That felt like a scholarship no brochure promised. Fridays I crashed the first-gen group because the pizza was dependable and the room was full of people whose parents thought FAFSA was a dental plan. We shared. Rose and Thorn. My Rose, I know every building by elevator noise. My Thorn, I feel like a tourist in my own life. Tourists ask good questions, a senior said. Keep asking. Mid-October, Lila dragged me to a sustainability task force meeting with people who wore lanyards like ranks. I presented slides I made on a library computer that pitted slow typers. No one laughed. Someone asked supply chain delays, someone else asked life cycle costs, a dean asked my schedule like he might carve out hours I didn't have. When it ended, Joe slapped my back so hard Agnes wobbled. The student paper ran a small story, Facilities plus Students Pilot Smart Thermostats. They used a photo of me holding a screwdriver like a bouquet. I mailed 2 copies home. A week later, Mom texted a picture of the article under the rooster magnet. Tyler called. Drumline was great, classes were chill. He'd learned 3 Greek letters that stood for no quiet after midnight. You must be loving it too, he said. I am, I said, surprising myself. I'm tired, but it's the kind that makes sense. The week before Thanksgiving I met Professor Sue, who taught operations and liked inventories the way poets like sonnets. She pointed at my notes. Ever think about systems engineering? You see the flow. I see jammed doors, I said. Same thing, she smiled. Come by office hours. Bring your thermostat proposal. I wasn't there yet. But the route finally had signs. Thanksgiving break tasted like coffee and laundry. I brought home a bag of clothes and a habit of waking at 4:30 even when no floor needed shining. Millbrook hadn't changed. The rooster magnet still supervised the fridge. The emergency jar had a pale ring where bills used to be. Mom fed me like famine was a pop quiz. You look thin, she said, stacking pancakes. Dad hovered like a man unfamiliar with pride. He asked about your thermostats, the way men here ask about fishing, curious, ready to bail if feelings show. I told him the pilot buildings had cut their fan runtime by 1/3. That's money we're not setting on fire, I said. That's my favorite kind of money, he grunted. Tyler rolled through in a new hoodie and a story about drumlines so loud the casserole flinched. How are classes? I asked. Chill, he said. At the sink, I dried while Dad scrubbed. The question I'd been saving cleared its throat. When you said people like us, what did you mean? He worked a pan that had seen wars. We don't have a safety net, he said. You fall, you hit ground. I didn't want you dangling off loans you can't pay. I heard keep your head down. He paused. Maybe I said it wrong. It landed like finding $20 in an old coat, small, surprising, still real. Back on campus, winter turned the sidewalks to glass. Facilities gave me a toolbox with my name sharpened on. Professor Sue wrote queuing theory like poetry. I translated it into Why the Burrito Line Ruins Lives. The thermostat pilot grew legs. Lila from sustainability marched in with charts. We presented to a task force where lanyards have ranks. I showed kilowatt hours saved and a payback that made the finance guy bite his pen. Joe called my tone professional sass. The student paper ran a photo of me with Agnes the buffer. Mom slid the clipping under the rooster. Dad texted, "Floors look straight." Time, not money, became the new emergency. Between facilities at dawn, classes by day, and tutoring at night, my calendar looked like a Jenga tower. First Gen Fridays fed us pizza and relief. A senior said, "Tourists ask the best questions." I pocketed that. In March, Professor Sue pulled me aside. "There's a summer co-op at a regional logistics firm. Paid. You'll learn more in 12 weeks than in 2 semesters. Paid," I repeated. "Apply. You see systems because you've cleaned them. That's not a joke, it's an advantage." That night I Googled. Cover letter. I wrote about Agnes, empty rooms before dawn, the thermostat project, and how a campus wakes in stages like a factory or a family. I attached charts and hit send, then polished a floor until it threw light back at me. Midterms punched, I punched back. A 78 in calc felt like grabbing the first rung of a real ladder. Tyler called. Academic probation. Not a big deal. "It is," I said gently. "You need office hours, not another hoodie." He went quiet and changed the subject. The offer email arrived at 5:07 a.m. while I was swapping a vacuum bag. Subject line, co-op position, offer. Hourly rate that made my chest light, a housing stipend, a mentor with a dad joke name. Joe hoops so loud Agnes shivered. I called home on my break. Mom cried the way you cry when good news steps on your throat. "What do we tell people?" she asked. "Tell them your son's working in logistics," I said. "Sometimes a hard hat, sometimes a tie." Dad took the phone. The word proud sounded stiff from disuse, but he got it out. "Bring the magazine if they put you in it," he said. "Sure," I laughed. The thought still flared, ridiculous and persistent as that rooster at dawn. "Not yet," I told it. "Not yet, closer." The logistics co-op began with a badge photo where I looked like someone who'd wandered into a building I used to clean. My mentor, Gabe, could find a bottleneck by listening. "You're the thermostat kid?" he said. "Cool. We do the same thing, just with trucks." The warehouse was rows of cardboard and humming forklifts. Gabe showed me dashboards the way Dad shows an engine, temperature, pressure, weird noises. "Everything is a system," he said. "Even the mistakes." They started me on returns. I mapped how items crawled back to shelves and timed the stumbles. We moved a scale 3 feet and saved 20 minutes a shift. I made a graph. Gabe made me present to supervisors with their names stitched on polos. When they clapped, it sounded like high fives finding a home. For once, money didn't make my pulse argue. I split each check into thirds, rent, savings, and the jar at home. One Saturday I drove to Millbrook in a borrowed sedan and handed Mom an envelope. She tried to refuse until I said, "It's for emergencies that finally picked me, too." Dad counted twice and slid it into the cookie tin beside my birth certificate, proof I existed. Tyler texted a photo of a syllabus with red warnings. "Probation meeting," he wrote. "Any advice?" "Office hours," I sent. "Sit up front and act like the professor is your boss," he replied with a skull and a drum. At the warehouse, Gabe dragged me to a stand-up with the operations VP, a woman who never wasted verbs. "Why is a college kid teaching us to walk less?" a supervisor joked. "Because he watched floors dry," Gabe said. "You notice time when you mop it." We trialed my 3-feet rule in 4 zones and shaved an hour a shift. The VP shook my hand like I was joining a responsible conspiracy. My keycard started beeping in welcome. Back on campus in August, Lila from Sustainability met me with charts. "Sensors paid off," she said. "We're scaling. Facilities wants procedures." Joe added, "We're putting your name on them so freshmen know who to blame." Professor Sue waved me in. "Turn your notes into a capstone, campus as a system, energy, people, time." We built a small team, 1 coder, 1 architecture major, and me with a keyring. We called it Ready Room because all we did was make rooms ready for whoever walked in next. Comms sent a photographer. The article ran on the university site, from Mop to Model. Mom printed it at the library. Then the plastics plant cut ours. Dad's shift slid. Mom picked up tables at dots. The jar on the fridge got skinny and defiant. We canceled the streaming service, Mom said. We still have reruns on Channel 8. I adjusted. More tutoring, weekend event shifts, fewer treats. I mailed home my textbook buyback money and told Mom to spend it on a space heater. She bought one for Aunt Kay, too. Tyler called less. When he did, the band was still loud, the grades still quiet. In October, the co-op VP emailed, "You graduating when?" "We have a spot." I wasn't done yet, but the road had stopped being a rumor. Homecoming weekend, I gave Mom and Dad a campus tour. They walked slowly with their hands in their pockets like people visiting a museum they helped mop. In the auditorium, Dad ran his palm along the rail. "You shine this?" "I used to," I said. "Now I tell people how." We watched a rehearsal. The conductor lifted a hand. The room obeyed. Dad leaned over. "Systems," he said, like he'd found a word that didn't scare him. On the way out, we passed the student center. A rack of alumni magazines glowed. Dad picked one up, saw the price, and put it down like a hot pan. "We don't need paper to be proud," he said, and walked on. I didn't argue. I just added to my quiet list, "One day, let them see me there without borrowing a copy at the dentist." Senior year finally moved like a conveyor belt someone oiled. Our capstone team, Ready Room, met in a windowless lab that smelled like dry erase markers and ambition. We mapped campus like a body, energy as blood, hallways as arteries, classrooms as lungs. When something wheezed, we listened. Back home, the plastics plant cut Dad's hours again. Mom picked up graveyard shifts at dots. The emergency jar kept its brave face. The rooster magnet stared like it wanted to unionize. I mailed grocery cards and called them student coupons. Mom pretended to believe me, which is a kind of love. Tyler came home mid-year with a box of t-shirts and a quiet I'd never seen on him. Probation had become a pause. Drumline didn't pause with him. We watched reruns on Channel 8 because streaming was a luxury again. "I blew it," he said, staring at a stain in the carpet. "You stumbled," I said. "Blowing it would be pretending you didn't." He huffed, then nodded like a scale moved 3 feet in his head. On campus, Professor Sue pushed our project out of the lab. "Pitch to the trustees," she said. "Keep it human." So I told them about Agnes the Buffer, about rooms waking up, about money you can hear burning if you stand at a vent and listen. Lila clicked through charts that made finance people smile like they'd found coupons in a winter coat. When we finished, Calms cornered me. "First-gen feature," the photographer said, as if ordering coffee. "Your story. Your face. The mop." "My face?" I laughed. "You sure you don't want someone with a trust fund and a better haircut?" "First-gen means first," he said. "Bring the buffer. She's a star." We shot at dawn in the auditorium. I wore my facilities polo under a blazer because my wardrobe believed in diplomacy. Agnes gleamed. Mid-smile, I thought of Dad's hands, Mom's coffee burns, Ms. Patel's cardigans, Tyler's box of shirts. I felt strange and right at the same time, like walking into a room you used to clean and seeing your name on the agenda. 2 months later the issue dropped, from Mop 2 Model, How a First-Gen Student Helped Midstate Cut Energy Waste. My face took up a polite amount of the cover. Agnes got a caption. Ready Room got their names spelled right. The story didn't make me a hero. It made us a system that worked. A subscription cost more than Channel 8, so I mailed a single copy home. It still arrived after the dentist's waiting room got theirs. Mom texted a photo of her finger pointing at my cover between articles about back pain and flossing mistakes. "That's my son," she told the receptionist, the text said. 3 rooster emojis, 1 heart, and, "We can't afford the magazine, but we don't have to, everyone downtown has it." Pride finds its own distribution. At the plastics plant, someone stapled the cover next to the I Wash poster. Dad called from the break room. "They slap it for luck on the way to the vending machine," he said, half a laugh. "You okay with that? People like us build things calm." he said, choosing words like parts. You just showed them where the switches are. It wasn't an apology for the old line. It was an update. Tyler tapped the cover on my phone with his thumbnail. You really did it. We did it, I said, Joe and Lila MS. Patel and Sue, my parents' tired feet, and the jar that sometimes saved the wrong thing and sometimes saved us. You can finish here if you want. Roads aren't only highways. He wiped an eye with the heel of his hand like he'd bumped it on a drum. Maybe I start with one class, he said. No hoodies required. I hung my own copy in Grandma's house, the house that was mine now, though I still said it softly, between a dinosaur suit photo and the cookie tin that proved I existed. Graduation was in 2 weeks. The co-op had turned into a real offer with health insurance that felt like wizardry. I still had a final to pass and a floor to shine. But the kitchen where college wasn't for people like us had my face on a magazine leaned by the rooster magnet, glaring less than usual. The jar on top of the fridge stared back, tape label curling. A thought I'd been saving cleared its throat. Not yet, I told it. Tomorrow. Graduation cap crooked. Gown, borrowed and 2 inches short, like I'd outgrown doubt faster than fabric. Mom came in her diner shoes, Dad in his plant jacket that still smelled faintly of solvent and Saturdays. Tyler wore a thrift store tie he'd ironed with a saucepan. When my name hit the speakers, Dad clapped too long. I waved my stupid hat at the rafters like the ceiling owed me a refund. After the photos, we skipped the $14 cupcakes and went home to Meatloaf and Channel 8. The alumni magazine cover, the one we couldn't afford to subscribe to, leaned against the rooster magnet like it paid rent. I pulled a chair to the fridge, took down the jar, and set it on the table. The masking tape label said emergency, edges curled like it had lived through storms. Break glass? Dad joked, half nervous. Sort of, I said, and slid an envelope across. Inside, a printed email and a card. The company matched my first donation, I told them. We started a small fund at the high school with Ms. Patel, covers test fees, bus tickets, the kind of emergencies that look like opportunities wearing cheap disguises. Mom pressed the card to her chest. Dad ran a thumb over the word fund like it might smear. There's more, I said, turning to Tyler. Community college opens registration Monday. 2 classes are paid, if you want them. I tapped the envelope again. No heroics. Just a first round. He swallowed. I don't deserve. Neither did I said. I took it anyway. Silence, then all the house sounds at once, the fridge clicking, the faucet drip keeping time, the rooster magnet judging less than usual. Dad reached for the masking tape, peeled off emergency, and handed me a Sharpie. Go on, he said. My hand shook, but the letters came out steady. Future. I stuck it on the jar. The glass didn't change. The room did. Dad cleared his throat. I used to say college isn't for people like us. He looked at the cover on the fridge, then at me. I was wrong. It wasn't for us, I said, until we made it ours. Mom laughed through tears. Tyler tapped the jar like it might hatch. I climbed back on the chair, lifted the magazine to the very top of the cabinet, and put the jar beside it so the 2 of them could keep watch over our kitchen. Look at that, Dad said, soft as a new engine. We finally subscribed. The rooster magnet, I swear, tilted like a salute.